I told Allie that generally when I speak, I don't like to stand in one place, but since you have a camera there, I'm going to be captive, I guess, unless we go that and we can run backwards and forwards and everything. Never say that. I'll walk up and down the rows and everything. I have had the pleasure of working in over 25 different countries around the world. Lately, Vietnam, Cambodia, Korea, Albania. And if we talk about livability, you got to talk about context. You got to talk about what is there at the present time. You go down and look at areas that are squatter settlements. Go to Brazil and see favelas. See what is livable. We take livability for granted. We always have and we probably always will. I like to tell my students when we talk about just the need for water, we know it's there. Some places they don't have water. That would be livable to them if they just simply had water. Yet what we're looking at a lot in the United States, we're looking at amenities in terms of livability. But one thing I can point out is, again, the word context. Can you fully understand and assess the issue at hand? Too many people will go around and talk about livability, and we'll talk about the different ranking systems. The ranking systems are always really great because you can put in 150 variables. You'll come up with every city being ranked very highly, probably. Probably one I'd probably ask about is how many people eat, what's the per capita Snicker bars ratio or something like that, and then we'd find out. But we have to look at the context of everything we do in terms of livability, planning. What we do in California is going to be different than what you do here in Washington. What Korea does is going to be different than Vietnam and all the different countries. So these are some of the areas we look at: clean air, drinking water, food, education, medical care. These are all areas that are always on these ranking systems that we take for granted. Go to some places, go to sub-Saharan Africa and ask about water, ask for medical care, ask for about food. We're going to probably say that's not a very livable place. One of my colleagues who did a chapter in a book with Fritz and I did some work in one of the favelas in Brazil. And she said, if you ask the residents there, it's livable. You ask everybody else, no, it's not. And so what do we look at? What context do we want to compare and contrast people to? And that's difficult because we like to compare things. Unfortunately, we compare apples and oranges. And it's very difficult when you're trying to look at these different countries and see who's responsible for doing this. Is it the national government? If they have state governments, is it the state government? Is it the local government? In some countries, it's the nonprofit sector. Because the federal government's just going, that's not our job. So we take it up as the nonprofit. So we have to deal with those issues. If you start looking at definitions, this is a definition from Partners for Livable Communities. I'm not going to read the definition. You can all read the definition. But you see down at the bottom all the different things: natural environment, social stability, equity. When Allie was talking about equity, equitable opportunities, does everybody have equal access to these things? We know it's not. We can ask, if we talk about livability, for whom? Is it for the inner city residents versus the suburban residents? San Diego, I consider a very nice city. But if you don't meet a certain income requirement, you're not going to buy a house. And since this is being taped, and I'm not going to have to erase this part of the tape, it isn't a livable city in terms of housing cost. Yet it's claimed itself as America's finest city. I mean, everybody's got their own little label of what their cities are. If it's the finest, it's the best, it's the biggest, or whatever. If it floats your boat, go with it. That's what a lot of people end up doing. Maria Vassilakou, if any of you guys look on the web and you see the next city thing that comes out every day, different urban issues and stuff like that, it has some great articles and very short articles. And this one from former Deputy Mayor Vienna: a city that is good for children is for everybody. So is that what we should strive for? With the kids first. If it's good for them, it should be good for us. But think about some things. It translates into emphasis on children and family, making sure the city can accommodate their needs. Well, accommodate our needs are growing. We've always been a country and people of rising expectations. We always want more. We always want better. Unfortunately, some people can't pay for better. They have to rely on government and nonprofit sectors to do a lot of their work. So what about those individuals? But if we start with the children, maybe that's where we need to educate more. If some of you are very active in the American Planning Association know what the American Planning Association is doing with youth, trying to train kids and get them to appreciate what communities are, what they should build in a community. I was lucky when I was in Albania. I went to a resort town on the coast called Vlora, and there was a group of kids, probably 12 to 15, that they were designing their own city, and they called it is our livable city. And they were drawing, not to scale, of course, but they were drawing things that they wanted to see in the city. And I had asked some really dumb questions. Have you guys shown this to your parents? No. Have you shown it to your teachers? No. Why? They just throw it away. They don't ask our opinions. That's what we don't do for a lot of times in our own populations. We don't ask people their opinions about various things. I've always amazed myself when you go to city council meetings, and I know all your students go to city council meetings all the time, right? All the time. And they will go there and they'll start seeing things. I said, now, would it be nice if people had access to these meetings? They said, well, they can get them on videotape, they can get them on the internet. Maybe some people don't have that. And somebody said, well, why don't they go around to different communities? I said, that might be something that could help make a city more livable, going around telling people what you're doing, becoming more educated on the issues. That's very important to do. But do we have the ability to access opportunities to improve our quality of life? Again, is it for everybody? Or there's certain groups? You can go to some cities around the United States and around the world. They're for specific groups. They're not designed to benefit everybody. And now I've talked in some places and they'll say, well, yeah, we're government, it has to be for everybody. And you go, okay, where are the parks? You have one major park that's over in this one side of the city. What about the other side of the city? Well, they can come over to this park. There's no mass train, there's a bus. There's no trolley. You want to ride your bike on one of these roads? No, you don't want to do that. So that's going to determine livability from their perspective and whether or not they have access to the park and recreation facilities, let alone even libraries. Because most people are just getting rid of libraries now saying they're all internet-based. We don't need a building for a library. A book. What's a book? A lot of people sit there going, I love books. I love the smell of them. I sneeze a lot when I smell them, but they're something that I've treasured all my life. And I probably have, frankly, too many of them. But when we talk about livability, we're talking about communities. What community are we talking about? Are we talking about jurisdiction, incorporated boundaries of a city? Or are we talking about a community of senior citizens, low-income groups, different ethnic groups? Those are communities as well. So are we talking about livability for one group or the whole city or what? If you look at a lot of livability surveys, they're generally not stratified. There's everybody talking. But if you would stratify them by location, you might find entirely different answers going on. And it's very interesting when you ask people about how did they do their survey and say, a traditional survey. I don't know what a traditional survey is anymore because everybody's using SurveyMonkey, which survey monkeys are generally for monkeys. And there's not a lot of pull with those types of surveys. But will we get different results? I had a professor one time told me, and a lot of things, he said, there are two answers. I said, will we get different results? He said, yeah. I said, well, you said there are two answers. He goes, hell yeah, that's the second one. And I'm sitting going, okay, I think I understand your point. And he says, you have to look into it. And a lot of people don't. They just assume everything is fine. This is one thing that came out in The Economist a couple of months ago I was reading. It talked about most livable is not the same as being the best, which is very true. Being the best at something doesn't mean it's livable. If you're in a country of not the best, is the not the best of the not the best? Okay. Maybe to them it is. But we start looking at areas that we assume everything means it's the top. If I was to ask you, what's the most livable city in the United States? What would some of the answers be? Every city you're from? I mean, you could pick Gary, Indiana, Cleveland, Paducah, Kentucky, Asheville, that's nice. Nashville, Tennessee. It's great if you like country music. That's livable for that. But all these things come up, and we need to look at those issues. How did it get on the community, or how did it get on the public policy agenda? Think about how livability first got into the stage. How did we start coming up with it? Concerned citizens got involved. They got involved. They started making issues to bring it up, talking about we need more livable communities. We need to have things that are better. We need better access for our children. Interest groups, nonprofit organizations. Virtually every city has a nonprofit organization dealing with some aspect of livability. Now, the key to me is getting those nonprofit groups together and creating a better interest group so you have more pull. A lot of times, pull of one person or one interest group can persuade a lot of people to get involved. The private sector. Private sector in terms of a lot of things, and people will start looking at livable and equating that with smart. Now, if you're talking about smart cities and you're talking about technology, information technologies, and how they can make communities better, technology companies are going to invent a hell of a lot of things. It's always amazed me, some of the people, when we were dealing with smart communities, we went to IBM and we were dealing with them and they said, do you have something you can develop and we can shrink wrap and sell? So you're going, well, we're trying to work with the people and help the people. Yeah, but we can sell it and make money off it. So I'm going, okay, now I know where you're coming from. And so the humanitarian aspect was gone. They just wanted to know, can I make money off it? And we know a lot of these things we can't, because they're not designed to do that. Media outlets. Media outlets. Get on the media. Whatever media you like. Publicize issues. Publicize meetings. Publicize debates. Whatever. You need to get the media involved. And frankly, if you can get one person from your local newspaper that really likes what you're doing, treat that person as an ally, because they can really get the ball rolling in a lot of cases. International efforts. There are a lot of international groups that are working together, trying to look at regional issues in terms of livability. Southeast Asia, a lot of issues are dealing with regional issues now. In the United States, of course, this isn't going to the White House, is it? Okay. We can talk about a lot of these issues, but if we're not in any international groups, the U.S. views are going to be gone. And I think we have a role and we have a voice in some of these concerns. And I do like to learn from other countries. It's very important for us not to just think we're going to look right down this thing and that's all we're going to see. See what other countries are doing. If you want to look at livability, look and see what Helsinki, Finland's doing. Look and see what Sweden, Stockholm's doing. Look at Vienna, which is always the #1 city in the world in terms of livability. And then find out 60-some% of their housing is social housing. There's a lot of different information that we can use from other countries, and we need to avail ourselves of that information. University courses. I always get a kick out of when my students will ask me things about certain topics, and they'll say, well, did you have GIS when you were in school? I said, not when I was in school, no. I said, we got trained in it afterwards. I said, we didn't have remote sensing because when I was in school, that was essentially a military operation. And I did get trained in remote sensing at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And I said, but our school didn't have it. And that's when I tell people, it's like, livability is something we're going to have now. 30 years ago, we didn't talk about livability. We may have talked about it in different ways, but we never discussed community livability. People assumed it was there. They assumed we were a livable community. And sometimes assumptions are what economists don't want to do. Make a lot of assumptions on those. Government levels, government at all levels. It's not the purview of any one level of government. We know the federal government has a sustainable partnership, which comes and goes whenever it's needed. We know state governments are doing a lot of activities. We know local governments are doing a hell of a lot of good stuff. And if we want to see innovation in livability, smartness, whatever, go to the local level. That's where you're seeing the innovation taking place. If we can drive the innovation to the federal government, so be it. But we do have some nonprofit groups that are out there doing a lot of things on climate change, resilience, that the government is not doing. They've just gotten out of the ball game. They've almost ignored the ball game. Now other groups are coming in saying, we're going to take the place, and we're going to do it. Now, whether those groups can sustain themselves, that's another issue. And I'm not talking about sustainable development. I'm talking about, can they keep themselves going? Because a lot of times we might have a great group, but they can't keep themselves going. There's no funding for them. They can't find somebody to act as their champion, if you want to call it that. Again, all levels of government play a role, private sector, nonprofit, citizens. Question should be, who doesn't play a role? Who shouldn't play a role? The answer should be nobody, everybody should play a role. But yet we like to rely on other people to do these things. Just like going to a city council meeting. And people say, well, I'm not affected by what they're talking about. You might be later. And if you've ever gone to a city council meeting, planning commission meeting, people say, I go there because it's an issue that's directly affecting me. Okay, so that means in my city, if we're talking about a low-income housing project in Southeast San Diego, you won't see a lot of La Jolla residents there. If we're talking a major condo project in La Jolla, you're not going to see a lot of Southeast San Diegans going to that meeting to complain about a high-rise building in La Jolla. Yet somebody will come and say, why was that group there? They're interested. If there can be an interest generated, we should be happy that we do have interest being generated by a lot of different groups. Roadblocks, anytime we're doing anything worthy, there are going to be roadblocks. I don't care what it is, any humanitarian effort, there's going to be a roadblock in front of it. Jane Jacobs, in her book, Death and Life of Great American Cities, I don't know if you still use it, Allie, but I use it in one of my classes still. And my students are sitting going, well, we do this stuff. I said, look, when the book was published, 1961. I said, of course we should be doing some of those things now. But what would Jane Jacobs say about some of these other things going on? Would the cities that she talked about, would they be livable today? I mean, when she talks about sitting on the stoop of your house, talking to kids, your neighbors, a lot of us just go out there, get in our car, well, we go, and that's a neighbor. Yeah, bye. They don't know who the neighbors are. There's no livability there if you just see people and just wave at them and say, who in the hell is that? And they go bye-bye. My students do that all the time. I used to teach a course where the first 3 classes, we'd go out and walk the neighborhoods. We'd ask people on livability issues and stuff, were their sidewalks in good shape? Were the schools doing well? Do you know test scores for your students? Are the parks in good shape, or are they just open space and that's it, there's nothing there? And in general, the question we would always get is, who are you? And why are you here? And you would tell them we were a class, we're doing this project for our classes, trying to get citizen input in some projects. Are you with the government? No, we're a group of citizens or students at San Diego State. Again, why are you here? And you keep going, I said, didn't I just answer that? And there's distrust. It's like, why do you care about my neighborhood? It's like, well, you're part of the city. Should we be concerned about the city? And all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, would you like some tea? All of a sudden the ice is broken, all of a sudden you start talking. And you get really great information once the ice is broken. And a lot of people sit there and kind of go, why didn't government come do this? But you'll hear that phrase, livability, in virtually every city council meeting, every planning commission meeting. And you ask, have you ever gone out to the communities? No. You say, are you afraid? I think sometimes the answer might be, yeah, they are afraid because they don't want to be voted out of office if we go and say, we don't care what you think. We know what we're going to do. Designing a dream city is easy. Rebuilding a living one takes imagination. Very true. Anybody ever played SimCity? SimCity was always a fun little game that you could make up your magical city and stuff like that. Then I always thought it got a little hokey when Godzilla would come and eat your city and stuff like that. Then the later version taught you how you can embezzle funds. It's like going, come on, man, what are we teaching our students? How to embezzle funds from a game? I mean, this is a quality I don't want to have in my students. And courses at universities were devoted to SimCity. They say, you're not using a version, are you, where they can embezzle their money? I said, well, it teaches them a lesson. It's like, yeah, what a great lesson to learn, how to embezzle money. Roadblocks, people. If you remember when we started dealing with the things with the environmental movement, Earth Day, if you remember seeing a nice little poster of Pogo, we have met the enemy and the enemy is us. We're our most dangerous enemy, we are. We do a lot of the things that we don't really think about the second, what's going to happen next, the repercussions, things looking down the road, environmental impact reports saying, is what you're going to do going to affect something else? What's the impact of what you're going to do on something else? We didn't think about those things. Now, a lot of the environmental regulations, we do have to think of those things. But now people are saying, what environmental regulations? We don't need environmental regulations. Well, there goes a big issue in livability. With no environment, that's going to really affect your livability. And remember, we have one environment, and that's it. Virtually all the stuff we talk about in livability, whether it's at international level, national level, or local level, state level, all goes back to quality of life research, survey type research. What do you consider best? What do you consider second best? Rank this, rank that. And if we get down to ranking everything, it's not going to be a great situation because everybody's going to have different opinions on it. Not all cities are ranked. If you go and look at the rankings, which we'll talk about in a minute, you'll see the top cities all the time. They're the same cities. They're Melbourne, they're Vienna, they're Toronto. U.S. cities? No, they're not there. Except if you go to some of the cities that are ranked, heavily ranked, and look at the cost of housing, you think you have it high here in Seattle? I think I have it high in San Diego. Go to London. And London's on some of the high quality of life cities. Go figure, maybe that's not a criteria they're using. Maybe more people are living in social housing there. That's very possible. Don't rank the cities, but rank the issues. Probably more relevant. But again, that takes a lot of knowledge to say, how do we do that? How do you operationalize it? And those are when my buddies doing the methods classes get together and start talking about those issues. And can we plot them? Can we show people? And factors are always weighted differently. One in one scale might be 10%, another one might be 20%. So they're all going to be rated differently. These are the ways some areas, some groups measure livability. You see EIU, Economist Intelligence Unit, looks at 30 qualitative and quantitative factors, including stability, which is a very hard term to me to measure. I'm not really sure how you measure stability. Healthcare, culture, environment, education, infrastructure. Infrastructure is a very good one, especially if you look at the United States when they say, what do we have, a $3 trillion deficit in terms of infrastructure? That's probably not going to be high ranking on our livability list in the United States. Monocle, factors such as safety and crime, climate and sunshine. How many days a year you have sunshine? Is that a criteria? How about if we have one? How many days a year can you see Mount Rainier? In Seattle, not Tacoma, in Seattle. That's not a valid criteria to use, but if you want to use it, somebody probably could. I mean, probably somebody has, if I imagine some students. No offense, students. Architecture, quality of architecture. I'm not sure what quality of architecture means. Anybody here an architect? Anybody want to admit they're an architect? Okay. That's like going in and looking at things like aesthetically pleasing. What is aesthetically pleasing in terms of architects? I remember we've had architects come to San Diego for competitions and they want to build a building and you kind of look at it and kind of go like, I love Dale Chihuly's glass. I love the glass. I don't think I want him to build a building though, because it'd be very different probably in what I conceive as a building. So what happens? They come in here and they say, we're going to build this great building, but it's no context. They haven't looked at San Diego to see the history of the area. They haven't looked at the culture. And especially if they want to put this building in an Hispanic section. They don't want to put a modern building there that has nothing to do with the area. They should celebrate the context of where they're going to put it. But they don't, because their stamp is what gets the approval. A world-class architect. Access to nature, public transportation. Now in San Diego, we have a nice trolley system, goes to some locations, not other locations. Bus system goes somewhere, sometimes it doesn't go. We have a first and last mile problem like everywhere else does in the United States and around the world. Public transportation. What is quality public transportation? It gets you there on time. That should be a measure. Is it comfortable? That should be a measure maybe. Some people look at it and say, I take the trolley because there's a better class of people on the trolley than the bus. I don't know if you've taken a trolley in San Diego before. We go down, we have season tickets to a professional baseball team in San Diego. And we go down there and occasionally we'll have a lady that gets on the trolley dressed in a cat suit. It's not Halloween. It's not Halloween when she's doing it. And she sits there and purrs. And does her face, scratches her face. We're just like going, what the hell is wrong with this person? And that's why I said, just ignore her. But some people won't ride it because of her. Now, maybe get into a great conversation with them about the benefits of Friskies versus Nature's Best. I don't know. That might be something good. But she's really not going to contribute much to a quality of life and access to public transportation. Mercer, livability characteristic index with 39 criteria. What's left out? We can keep adding criteria, but what does it matter if you've got all these criteria? And I always say, if you got the criteria and you find out what it is, how do you keep it going? We have a roundtable at the Urban Affairs Association every year on academic perspectives and livability. And I always talk to people and I always tell them, I said, you want to become a livable community. Do you know how you want to get there? They said, but we want to become one. I said, but what do you do once you become one? I said, you got to keep it going, don't you? Don't you want to try to maintain it and keep it going, self-perpetuate it and whatever? I said, but you got to have to change it. Because everything we do means you're going to have to change. You're going to have to adapt to change. You got to respond to new technologies. How can they better people? But if you just say, I want to become a smart community, it's like getting something here and walking off and saying, I'm dropping a mic. I'm a smart community. And then you walk away. I'm a livable community. That's not good enough. That means you think you've achieved something and it's going to keep going. It won't. It'll go away quicker than you know it because people get complacent and they just assume everything's going to be fine. Political economic stability. We probably would not rank very high on that in the United States right now. And there are probably some other countries that would not be ranked very high on that right now as well. Because we always have political instability around the world. And I sometimes think, if you want to be a political scientist through livability, political science style, use that as a criteria. But if you're talking about a quality of life, probably not going to be there for you. Because livability is going to be different in terms of every different governmental jurisdiction that I've worked in and that I know of. Access to goods. Again, the word access, equity. Pretty soon, one of the photographs I have in Plain in the USA is a picture of a port showing cargo cranes. And one of the reviewers of my book, the 5th edition, said, you should take that out of there. Put FedEx trucks, put Prime trucks there. That's where everybody knows how they get their goods. So, God, okay, how about, can we put a ship? And I said, how about a transshipment point? They come there on a ship, they go in a container, they go to a rail, they go to a truck. I just have 3 or 4 little pictures showing how they go out. And the guy says, that might be good. I said, that takes 5 photographs. I said, do you know how much a color photograph on a book's going to cost? And nobody will buy the book. I said, great method, great effort to do something like that. But we start looking at access to goods. How many people go to shopping malls anymore? I do, because I'm at the age now I like to just walk around the mall. It's kind of fun, just walk around and watch people, like going to the airports and watching people. I go there because I want to see what stores are there, because most people come in and say, I'll buy it on Amazon, through Amazon. So you're going, so pretty soon, quality of life is going to be how many vacant malls do you have? Because now we're retrofitting our malls to universities, libraries, community centers, whatever we think we can use them for. Housing. Theaters are going to be a thing of the past because you can get everything on the computer. You can download everything. So quality of life is going to be right there at our fingertip. If you look at quality of life, you say, can smartness, the technology is coming out as being smart. Can that help us? Think about how smart we'd be if we could drive home, use your Bluetooth, call your coffee maker, tell it to brew your coffee, get it ready at 4:35, turn the temperature up, make sure this TV station's on because I want to come in, hit the ground running. I want my bath temperature at 78 degrees or whatever. What are you going to do? What do you do? You're letting technology do everything for you. That's not quality. That's couch potato-ness. But we all do it. And pretty soon we have to have probably criteria looking at how much are we going to do with those. Are we going to use those types of characteristics? Lessons from other countries. Again, all of us are on a journey in terms of livability. How we achieve it's going to be different. I've been in countries, again, where it's a national function to do certain things. I've been in countries where national government says, let the provinces, they can take care of that stuff. Let the cities take care of that stuff. We see the bigger picture. That's not what we're looking at. Poland, a national urban policy focused on improving quality of life. In Poland, not Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic, not Germany, but Poland. Because people would like to just probably say, I'm going to take a survey and use it in Germany. It may not be appropriate in Germany. If you go to some countries that have had really some problems developing government structures. I was very fortunate to work in the Baltic states, in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia for a long period of time. And people were always going there telling them, I can tell you what to do. Let me show you. It'll cost you this much money. They want a general plan developed. They want all these roads developed. And I said, are you allowed to do a general plan or a comprehensive plan or a master, whatever it's called in your country? I don't know. You might want to find out. Because the government might tell you must include certain things in it. Maybe one of these things in Poland looks at quality of life, saying, are you satisfied with the general plan of Warsaw? If so, why? If not, why? India, National Urban Renewal Mission to improve quality of life, smart city projects, Ministry of Urban Development developed a livability index specifically toward Indian cities. Now, if you know anything about Indian cities, probably the high-techest one is Bangalore. It probably would rank very high on a lot of indexes because they have a high quality of education backgrounds, checks there. They have good educational systems. People come all over. They're magnets. So they would probably say that is a very good quality of life in Bangalore because there are job opportunities there. Problem is a lot of people that work in those jobs may not have housing. They may be living somewhere else where they probably can't afford to get into housing in Bangalore. That's always an issue. Australia. That's the biggest challenge to me when people spell livability with an E. It's always livable with an E. And every time my publisher always corrects me, I said, no, that's what they spell it as, so leave it alone. It's like, well, why don't they spell it without the E? How the hell do I know? If anybody can tell me, let me know. Program focusing on improving quality of life, supporting local, state, and territory governments to improve quality of life in city capitals and major regional cities. City capitals and major regional cities. What about the smaller cities, the villages, the hamlets? They want the big cities like as magnets that everybody's going to be attracted to. Now, if you go to Cambodia, you go to Phnom Penh, you'll see a lot of squatter settlements all around Phnom Penh. Mainly because there's not enough housing there for them. They can't afford there. There's no water, sewage. Some of the little lakes, ponds, if you want to call them ponds that were there, have been reclaimed, dirt put in them, and now they're building housing on the sites. So there goes that problem, access to water. So one thing you do good might result in something coming up bad. Singapore, if you want to see a very active city-state doing livability work, go to the Center for Livable Cities in Singapore, their website. Tremendous amount of work they're doing. They have fellowships there every year for people that want to come there and work in Singapore to find out what they're doing, do comparative research and stuff like that. They have a fellows program. It's a great opportunity if you want to see what other countries are doing. They developed a livability framework in 2012, and the second edition of Community Livability has a chapter on Singapore. The director of the Center for Livable Cities wrote the chapter. Great graphics where you can see exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. It's great to see why people are doing it, but what for? I like to see what they're doing, but why are they doing it one way? Because sometimes it's because that's the only way they know. Other ways, that's what they were told. They won't get funding if they don't. There's lots of different reasons. You'll see the bottom underlined line acknowledges it is a balancing act. Achieving livability is a balancing act. Sustainable development is a balancing act. If you look at equity, economics, environment, You go back to the three-legged stool and all those things. You're not going to see a lot of people say, you know what it's like to sit on a three-legged stool and one leg breaks? You're gone. You can't treat them equally, but you've got to try. What most countries are doing in terms of livability, they're focused on economic livability at the expense of possibly environmental livability. And we're seeing so many things today being changed. We're seeing more movement, and if you're in environmental policy, we're seeing more movement into topics called environmental federalism. What roles of government? What are the roles of government, and how have they changed? The same thing with the court systems, housing policy, transportation, education. The roles have switched, they've changed. Important question, what affects community livability? Climate change, we know that. I can imagine if you go to Indonesia and somebody says, Jakarta's a livable city. Well, it's getting ready to be underwater and they're moving the capital to Borneo. So there goes its livability. Economic downturns. Economic downturns, lack of jobs, definitely affects livability because you can't afford various things, food, medical care, vacations if you once had them to begin with. Some people would say vacation. What the hell is a vacation? That's a day when you don't do anything. What's that? It's like when Al was talking about, I still do a lot of things. I like doing these things. I mean, my vacation is maybe not having 30 emails from my students and say, you didn't respond to me in 5 minutes. I thought something was wrong. It's like, oh God, I'm at the movie, leave me alone. But we have to look at those issues. Political changes. Probably shouldn't get into that very much. Political changes all around the world. Administrations come, administrations go. We have these policies, we don't have those policies. We change this policy to that policy. It's like the witness relocation program with policies. We don't like it, but we're going to change the name and call it something else. And then it'll work. And I did it. So no, that's not the way it's done. You just don't change the name of a policy. But political changes will affect livability because resources could be put there because of those changes. Technological changes. New technologies. Think right now of transportation. Think of all the changes taking place in transportation. I mean, electric vehicles, okay. Autonomous vehicles, if everybody has an autonomous vehicle, I'll get one. But if only 80% get them, I'm not getting one. Because essentially I don't trust everybody to drive those things. Hyperloops, Elon Musk Hyperloop and everything underground. If he can get you somewhere in 20 seconds, your body might get there, but the rest of your body's probably somewhere else. And they're just waiting for it. But technology is going to change. Transportation technologies, getting there faster. We always want to minimize the distance if we can go somewhere quicker. Conflicts. Conflicts being war, armed conflicts. Could be economic conflicts, trade embargoes, whatever. Those are conflicts that will affect quality of life in areas. If they can't get goods needed, they can't get medical supplies needed in those areas. Personal changes and perceptions. One thing that always interested me when I got into planning was that planning changes. Issues are always coming up that I didn't know about, and that's great. I like different things. We teach planning at my school as an interdisciplinary program. You're going to get everything from planning, you're going to get everything from methods, history, theory, quantitative methods, housing, transportation, urban design. And I said if I could require a course in theology, I would. And people always wonder, what the hell is a theology course? I said, you got to pray a lot. You got to pray that some of these things you're doing is going to work. Because you don't really know if they are going to actually work. Is the goal simply to reach our journey and say we're a livable community? No. If we just are satisfied with being all of a sudden ranked, then we say, my job is done. We've been ranked as a livable city. I'm over. I'm out of here. That's not going to do any good. It'll make you happy for a day and your citizens happy for a day, but then after that, things are only going to go down unless somebody's there to champion your community, champion your projects. How do you sustain livability? Keep it going, enhance what you have, monitor what you have. See the bottom, need to adapt to changes. People change, technologies change, issues change. You got to be open to all those changes. And if anybody in here has ever read a book called Beyond the Stable State by Donald Schoen, talking about people actively resist change. Very true. I want everybody to change, but not me. we will essentially fight to stop it. I've known people that when typewriters going out of vogue and computers were coming in, I'm not learning a computer. One of our staff wanted to file a grievance because we wanted to learn how to use a computer. Okay, so you don't have to use carbon paper. Does that help? No, I don't mind carbon paper. Can't fight that. Just go with the flow. Question, how long does it take to become livable? Answer, depends on where you are and where you want to go. If you don't know where you are, it's not going to be easy to find where you want to go. That's like in history and planning. You got to look at planning history. See where you're coming from. What happened in the past? Can you learn from the past? That's very important. Don't simply declare you're a livable community and stop. I've said that a couple times, and that's a very important point to remember. It's something you must change or maintain, monitor, adapt, and change if needed. Then the bottom sentence, repeat. Because again, things are going to change. Change is good, change is bad. It's how you perceive it and how you respond to it. And this is a quote I like with my students on Da Vinci and importance of implementation. I have been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Being willing is not enough, we must do. We can talk a mean livability game, but if you don't want to back it up, what's the good of it? Everybody can write a book on something, but if they don't plan it, they don't write it, they don't do the policy work included in it, written words are easy. Making them come to action is difficult. It's like if you're doing your general plans or your comprehensive plans. I like to put a comprehensive plan on my desk in my office with students, and they come in and say, "You talk about implementation?" I said, "Yeah, what do you see right here? I see a book." I said, "Do you see a book's got legs? Is that book moving?" You got to make it do something. You got to make it dance, whatever. Make it come to life. Because words are words. We can talk livability all we want to. But if we don't back it up with action, talk's cheap. And that's a problem. And I will shut up because Allie told me there's a couple of minutes left. So I will stop here and be happy to answer any questions if you have.
All right. While you think about questions, I'm going to use the privilege of quizzing you on the book.
Which one?
The one on global perspective. Of the cities there were chapters on different cities. Can you think of one or two examples out of the book in which you were impressed by the plans that were implemented and were discussed in those chapters?
Singapore, most definitely, because the Center for Livable Communities is a very strong organization, very well-respected organization in Singapore. So they have the eyes and the ears of everybody they need to have the eyes and ears of. That's probably the best one, I think, in terms of doing something that's very relevant. Second was a chapter we had on a city in Brazil. And that's the lady who did the chapter on the favelas. Yep. And her thought was essentially, whenever you hear the word favela, slum. And all of a sudden, the government's now starting to work with some of the favelas and making them very livable. And she was sitting there going, people are not afraid to go to them anymore. But yet we have to get people outside to realize these are livable places. And I think, what was that chapter? I'm getting two books mixed up now.
It's okay, I'm quizzing.
But those are two. Yeah.
A quick and kind of general question. I've never cottoned to the phrase livability because it doesn't mean anything to me. So let me ask this: what good has been done? What's been accomplished because of all these rankings? What purpose has this word actually played?
For the ranking systems I talked about, the best thing they have done for those individual cities is to promote those cities. That's it. They're economic boosterism things. That's all.
Then why are we spending so much attention on it? What is coming?
People want to see how their city could possibly get into that type of a ranking system. They want to see, can they, yeah. I mean, why do we have any ranking?
I have a follow-up, actually, about the use of terms.
And I'm struck, and in fact, with the students who are here tonight, we are from a power decentralization class on urban governance. And so when you're talking about decision makers, I think we would think of that as Stephen Luke's first dimension of power, decision making. And the agenda setting being the second dimension of power. And the third dimension, which is really the ideological and normative commitments that people have and why and how things get onto the agenda. One of the things that I kind of sense in the subtext of your presentation, but you haven't talked about specifically, so I'm going to ask you to, is the difference between the terms sustainability and livability, and whether, in fact, the move towards using the word livability is meant to try to push some things onto the agenda or enroll people in caring about their cities and planning of cities in a way that sustainability didn't seem to be able to do, that people felt kind of frustrated with the word sustainability, or they thought it was just for like really liberal people who were over-identified with the UN, or, I don't know. But I'm curious about the tension between those two terms.
I think a lot of people are using livability as the way you mentioned it, the last part of what you were talking about. It is kind of, in some articles, you look at some of the American Planning Association articles, they equate livability with sustainability. And I'm not sure if you really can, because sustainability is not so much rankings. Livability is purely rankings with most people. I don't think I've ever seen any ranking system of sustainable cities. Resilient cities I have, but not sustainable cities. And I believe livability is something that might be watered down from sustainability, but I can't speak with any reliance on that one.
I think the question being asked also is important in the sense that livability is more understandable in common language.
Well, yeah, most people don't want to go to the Brundtland Commission to look at all the different languages and coming out.
Hi. Just a few slides ago, you were talking about Australia and how there was a focus on livability in the cities, but not so much outside of the big cities. I was reading a little bit about Melbourne. I tend to focus a bit on transportation. I was looking at Melbourne and Victoria about how they've been building a lot of new roads and investing a lot outside of the center, the CBD, I think they refer to it as. Have you seen any areas around the world that have been able to successfully invest, not just in the central business district, but also outside of it, but also connect everything without, I guess, a series of how we build it in the U.S., just a lot of freeways and stuff? Have you seen, like in maybe Japan or not Singapore, I guess it's too small, but.
Vienna is pushing their subway system a lot further out, opening up land for development. Now, whether that's good because they're going to consume more land and take away some of the environmental amenities out there, that's one thing. It's more of a national function to do that because they're trying to open up more land for economic development purposes. They like to see more satellite type places. Seoul, Korea, if you've been to Seoul, Korea, their system is very congested. I was in Seoul 2 years ago, and I have never seen such a massive humanity trying to get into places, in buses and everything. And it's very frustrating for me because when I ride the subway in New York, I feel like, my God, what the hell am I doing out here? Would somebody scratch my back type thing. Seoul, you just go with the flow. But Vienna is probably the main one I have seen. San Diego is starting to push its trolley system out further and further. They are having problems. We had a ballot measure that came up and citizens voted against it to give more money for transportation improvements because part of the regional plan in San Diego is to put more lanes on the roads. And we're sitting going, we're supposed to be doing mass transit and trying to have multiple modes of transportation. We want to put more road lanes. Some people say, well, we can make them toll lanes. And then, of course, toll lanes are regressive and stuff like that. San Diego, they're putting a new trolley line to UCSD. That's very expensive. And now they want to put a trolley line up to Camp Pendleton, Oceanside area. And as one of my students asked me, said, when do I think that will appear? And I said, I'll be dead. I won't know. This could be at least 25 years if they even go, because the funding will come and the funding will go. Problem with the transit programs, if you're getting federal money, Congress appropriates money, then they don't appropriate money. Then they appropriate money, and then they don't appropriate money. Yep.
Hi, thanks. So
I recognize and share the kind of skepticism and reluctance around the rankings of livability and so on. I'm wondering, is this a question of language then, right, or terminology? Has it gotten to a point where, not unlike sustainability, that the terminology emerged out of a real desire and then kind of morphed into something that kind of lost the original intent? And so, is there a different language then? Can we say, okay, fine, livability has been kind of co-opted to be a part of these rankings, and it doesn't really mean anything that we want it to mean. So is there something else then that can be meaningful? Because I think originally, on some level, it's trying to capture some kind of sentiment. And so is there a different way then that we should be talking about what livability was intended to capture at the outset?
I think one thing we miss when we talk about livability is just the ability to tell stories of livable cities, livable communities. I have personally not a big fan of comparing my city to your city. I mean, I don't see any purpose that it actually serves. We get into boosterism campaigns, economics, and we lose companies to Austin, Texas, or to Pittsburgh and stuff like that. But why do I have to compare myself to your city? And I know we do that to make some people feel better, because some places, I know San Diego spends tons of money on advertisements in Forbes magazine. And it compares what we do to what other cities do. Why? I don't understand that. There's better use of that money that we could do. Yet I think we're so used to comparing cities. We want to see our city better than somebody else's city. And to show you the absurdity of it, Pittsburgh, we lost a company to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a number of years ago. And San Diego was complaining and all that stuff. And Pittsburgh was going, yeah, all that stuff. Pittsburgh said, we've won a couple of Super Bowls. And San Diego's like going, God, we haven't been to, we lost the Super Bowl. And all of a sudden, Pittsburgh came back and said, we have a symphony, you don't. So we got a symphony. And then pretty soon it'll be, you lost the Chargers to Los Angeles. And we said, no, we didn't lose the Chargers, they were never here. But why do you have to compare? I understand the need to compare things, but I just don't like it. And unfortunately, livability, that's what all it is comparing different ranking systems. But we've lost the ability to tell, why is your city livable? And I love, if you could go out and do oral histories of people on livability that have lived in a community, say, for 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, and just say, how's it changed? And then do it to more and more people and tell that story. That probably is more important than looking at all the different indexes.
So one of our colleagues said one time that livability is more touchable and now, and sustainability is more future, and therefore people connect to the now more than they connect to what could happen 20 or 30 years from now. So I think the idea is something that I can see the result here. So what do you think about livability as a notion of more immediate feel for the place, as opposed to something that we say, this will happen, if you don't do this in 30 years from now, something will happen?
It's looking at your orientation toward time.
Yeah.
I mean, Banfield looked at that thing when he was talking about low-income individuals have a present orientation. Higher-income people have more of a future orientation toward things. Livability is now. Sustainability, as you said, is in the future.
And I think, so in that sense, do you think that livability was co-opted into the ranking system because the origin of it was more about how a place is?
I think it probably was, and it probably may have been done by the same person.
Yeah.
They just wanted a different publication.
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I want to maybe revisit, is this on? Yeah. I want to maybe revisit this index question that JW raised and it sort of circulate around the room. So somewhat of this argument you're making, and one of the arguments you're making in your talk is about context, the importance of understanding livability in context. So how would you respond to, say, arguably the most successful index created in recent decade by the United Nations, the Human Development Index, which is about context, but which is about universal discourses of what it means to be okay. And so percentage of women in parliament, child morbidity rates are universal norms that at this point in history, the United Nations is organized. So it's not entirely context specific. And so how do you deal with the transnational discourses within planning and work them into a livability conversation whilst taking care of context?
I think if the UN index could be used universally, I think it would be very good to do. I think you'd probably have arguments about developing versus developed countries, whether some of those measures are reliable and whether or not the information is even available in some of the countries. I know if you look at things like any of the World Bank books on countries, different countries, they have measures like the ones the UN uses, and they seem to be very logical. And I remember asking a question to somebody at the World Bank, where did you get the information? And they said it was obtained by somebody in that country. And I don't know if I'd rely on that in those countries. Transnational in terms of planning, some countries you can compare each other to, others, I would not compare anything in the UK planning-wise to the US. My colleague Barry Cullingworth, who did the first edition book, had a book called Planning in the UK that's in 15 editions. He told me, he says, if you ever want to learn not how to plan, go to Europe, go to England. And he said, so if you want to look at white papers, blue papers, and all those things, you're going to get confused. I think going back to your original point of the UN index, it's worthy of a try. Whether you can get somebody to get all the information, that's another question.
One last question from me.
Oh, to give you a question, okay.
Here we go. So I think what you're talking about in terms of the size of the cities that we pay attention to, a few years ago at the Urban Affairs Association, we brought up this conversation as well. Historically, urban studies, urban planning research has been focusing on larger cities. What would take for us as within the discipline and the practice, because the practice does happen in mid-sized cities, what do you think would push the conversation and research into mid-sized and smaller cities?
If organizations like HUD, Department of Commerce, Transportation, EPA could see the benefits of the work that they have done in the smaller cities, I don't want to call them second-tier cities, but the smaller cities, and see that they can be replicated possibly, be nuanced, little tweaks here and there, that might do it. But I agree, we look at mostly the large cities. But the small cities, the medium-sized cities cannot apply what they're learning in the large cities to their scale. Their scale is entirely different. I mean, I don't know about in your classes, but when I have a student ask me, said, well, compare San Diego to New York. And I say, I'd prefer not to. I mean, how do you compare San Diego to New York? I mean, do you get most people, a lot of people saying compare Tacoma to Seattle?
I will not answer that question.
Okay,
but
Tacoma to Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, the issue is regions also and how you think about regions in that process. Yes. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much, Roger. It was absolutely a pleasure.